was the first time of a large number of blacks in a technical area successfully performing after being given the opportunity. So preserving that legacy is very important today. And then when we look at our very diverse society and the desire not only of the military but for commercial and business concerns to mirror the society, we still have a need for motivating minorities into interest into the career opportunities in aviation and space. And so that's been our goal, is preserve the legacy, motivate young people, particularly minorities, to mentor them into the aviation and aerospace career areas for the importance it means to our country, preserving our freedoms, and being willing to serve a country even with its problems.
Let me ask you about, I want to go backtrack. I'm just going to ask you to comment on this individual, that would be Noel Parrish, and his contribution to really getting that program, the Tuskegee program, going and really being in a position to really...
Well, in a way, he saved the program. Noel Parrish came into the program as a captain. I didn't get to personally know him during the time he was doing some very important things, but did later, in later years in his life, get to know him personally well. But he was a person who, out of his own background and training, I think both religious training and look on life and the opportunity, believed that all people should be given an opportunity. And the very early days under the first commander, the atmosphere and the training environment wasn't at its best there at Tuskegee, because I think his name was Kimball, was more interested in preserving the segregation environment than promoting the opportunity, and certainly that was recognized, and Parrish was moved from operations to commander of the unit. And certainly he did not eliminate segregation, but he found a way to keep the fires dampened and allowed the training to continue and people to respect that. But because he personally believed that people should be given the opportunity to prove themselves, not relegated just based on their color or other circumstance of being told what they can and can't do. And that certainly boded well for the continuation of the program, and in another way, his own respect for those who persevered through the program showed in a way rather unusual, because he attended every convention that we had until he died.
He put a lot on the line, didn't he? I mean, being a white officer at that time, being
he
as vocal
finally
as he
became
was.
a brigadier general, but I would imagine had he had the same career and not put himself on the line, he would have probably been advanced even farther. I think whether he realized it, I don't know, but he did, I think, jeopardize his total possibility in his career, because he stood tall when it wasn't popular to give minorities the opportunity to be included.
All right. I asked you about Jackie Cochran.
Didn't know that much about her and so on. I have certainly come to respect. I have a number of good friends who were part of the Women Air Service Pilots, the WASP, and realized the parallels in our experience and story, because women were treated just equally bad as Negroes at the time, and the Women Air Service Pilots even served their country without even being recognized, being properly paid, given uniforms, and so on. Their recognition came well after their years of service, flying all of the aircraft that were produced, from factories to the field, becoming instructors, everything that they did, ferrying aircraft, yet they were not respected, and so on. So, but I know she was instrumental in the use of women in the part of the getting the Air Corps hierarchy, who didn't believe women should be flying just as well as they didn't believe blacks should be flying, and she was instrumental and called in to form the Women's Army Corps, the early WACs that were used, and so on, and did some of the recruiting and work there. But I didn't get to know her personally. I just learned of that experience of what she did later in years.
Okay. Ira Aker.
Ira Aker, again, during the time I didn't know, he became the commander of 15th Air Force and greatly respected. I'm not sure what I didn't get to know him well enough to know what his early personal feelings were, but certainly know that as the 99th's work was accomplished, that he recognized what they were doing, even though they were assigned to the 33rd Fighter Group. Bill Momeyer was, Colonel Momeyer was the commander. He didn't want them. In fact, they weren't on even assigned, billeted, if you will, on the same base where he was. The 99th had their own base. But his reports of what the 99th was doing reflected his attitude. Mediocre, send them off to patrol somewhere, Liberia, a long ways from the front lines, that type of thing. But General Aker recognized that the bombing capability, the number of bombs on target, if you will, the 99th was doing just as well as anybody else. In fact, became very expert at their interdiction work on rail and tunnels and bridges and supporting the front line. And he recognized that at his higher level of command. So I think became supportive in not allowing the, I call them attitude reflective reports that Momeyer continued to submit, and the recommendations not to be followed, and kept the 99th in combat.
I wanted to ask you too, something I didn't ask you back when we were originally talking about it, when you first went over to Italy, and originally the bombers didn't know that there were black pilots escorting and protecting them originally.
No, they didn't. There were 5 fighter groups, I believe it was, picked when the escort work started, and for 2 reasons, both for recognition by the gunners on the bombers, both the B-17s and 24s. The different fighter groups began to paint their tail surfaces different. We had the candy stripe, the checkerboard square, and we became the red tails. But the fighter groups, the bomber groups were not informed that the 332nd Fighter Group were black pilots when we started. Again, whether that was a factor that Aker saw had some significance, don't know, but he was the 15th Air Force commander. But anyway, they weren't told this. Slowly, some groups began to learn, although we had our own rest camp. Well, I never put a foot on the Isle of Capri, where the rest camp, because we, under the segregation, we had our own camp of Villa above the Bay of Naples. There, of course, Capri is in that same area, but we were still separate. But that's the way it came out.
And it just seems ridiculous though, because if you've never lost a bomber, and certainly that reputation got back to them, and suddenly you guys were very popular.
Yeah, it began to get out. I think the real realization of the total impact of the experience didn't come until historians began to compare mission records and so on, and that's what's been borne out. But the I think the thing that stood out most for the groups, even though some of them didn't know that the red tails were black pilots, was the nature of the type of escort that we were giving, and that again stems from our respect for and following the orders of Ben Davis, and he let it be known that he wouldn't tolerate any pilot going off happy hunting. That was, many times we've been in the air and they say there's word that enemy aircraft are in the air, but you don't know where they are. Well, there have been known cases where pilots would go off trying to find them, but they left bombers unprotected in doing that, and in following the orders of Colonel Davis at the time, that's one thing we didn't do. We stuck with the bombers in very close formation. The other side of it, I think the impact that often isn't said too, that when we got the P-51s in July of '44, they then assigned the 99th to the 332nd Fighter Group. So we had the largest group fighting force in 15th Air Force because we had 4 squadrons in the group. And many times we put 16 aircraft a squadron in the air for a mission, and so we were able to provide the type of escort and as I say, stuck with the bombers as long as the fuel made it possible in a manner that recognition, saying the guys saying, I like the way the red tails are there, because we weren't running off.
Last question for you. What do you think is the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen?
I think the legacy bears out a number of things, some related to saying, first of all, the fact that the training received was the standard training. They didn't have to change anything or change the rules to make it possible. And I think our American training is superior to anywhere in the world, and that's one of the reasons for our still dominance and #1 position. We want to keep it that way. But I think the experience points up a number of things. Number one, the importance of education, that is being prepared when opportunities come, and certainly in that day, in fact, for the first classes, you had to have a college degree to enter. Well, if there hadn't been those who had fought for those college opportunities in the late 30s and early 40s, they could have said, yeah, we'll take you, knowing that nobody had a college degree, so you wouldn't get there. They've later learned that isn't even a requirement. But the importance of education and being prepared, I think, is certainly one of the legacies of the experience, and the other is that I think also related to education when you look at what it means to the future, and that is that our whole education system ought to be about bringing out the best in every youngster that walks in a school door. Because we don't know, you can't, based on color or national origin or happenstance of birth, who has the capabilities. We have to bring those things out, and whether we're talking engineering or scientists or pilots or mechanics, whatever level. Because the other side of the experience is those hundreds of mechanics we have, the reporters always want to come and talk to the pilots. Well, that was the end result, get bomber pilots, fighter pilots in the air. But our mechanics had not grown up in the aircraft world or the aircraft factories either, yet they were able on short notice in some cases as we transition to the P-47 to P-51, to master those techniques and be able to produce and perform as well as anybody. And that speaks to part of that legacy, is that and why we want to mentor young folks and so on, that you've got to prepare yourself for opportunities, and education is one of those. The other side of that is that you've got to look on the bright side of things, keep a positive attitude. The negative attitude's only, well, to me, you know, you can dig a hole and jump in it, but you limit your ability to see what's going on and participate down in a hole. So you have to keep up the more positive side of things that take place.
Bitterness not productive.
Very much so. Not at all. So it's been a part. Always look on the positive side and try to keep your eyes focused on the right target and the right level.